This is Talent Center Stage. Hi everyone, welcome to the virtual edition of Talent Center Stage, a show where we'll bring you inspiring stories of super talented people. My name is Cynthia and I'm your host. With me on this episode is a woman who was a victim of a hideously brutal rape and near-death experience at the age of 15. She's going to share with us how she turned her pains into power. Join me as I welcome Lynn Hill. Hi, Lynn. You're welcome to the show.
Hi. Well, thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much for having me and for hosting me. I'm truly humbled and honored. Thank you.
I'm really excited to have you here because I know 1,000,001 persons who will be inspired by this session.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, Lynn, let's get started with you telling us a little bit about yourself.
I am a 53-year-old warrior goddess. You know, Picasso said there are only two kinds of women. You get goddesses and doormats. And the one thing that I do know is that I'm not a doormat, and that therefore makes me a goddess.
Oh, yeah.
So I am a 53. I'm a 53-year-old. 2 months short of 53, or 1.5 to be exact. I'm an inspirational speaker. I'm an author, transformation and leadership coach, as well as a poet. I'm also a mom of a 33-year-old and a 26-year-old. I'm also a daughter. I'm very honored and blessed to have both parents. My dad's 80, my mom's 74. I'm passionate. I'm a passionate warrior woman who has relentlessly pursued her dreams.
I really love your energy. Okay, Lynn, you're considered an inspirational powerhouse in South Africa. So tell me, how did you become an inspirational speaker?
If I need to get technical about it, I think technically it was a definitive moment, very early in my life, a moment in which I was spared from death. It was a moment in which I was experiencing sexual violation of the most brutal accord, to a point that I had been literally beaten, broken. I'd been beaten to a pulp. I lost consciousness and traveled down the tunnel of death. As I crossed over, I was actually called back. It was not my time yet. And I believe that I was spared from death. In that moment and in the ensuing months, obviously, I did not know that I wanted to become an inspirational speaker. But what I did know was that I was spared from death to do something because of my pain, because of what I had endured. And so that marked the beginning of what would progressively be a journey where my audiences would be school kids, would be fellow educators, eventually in corporate, but I never at those points shared my story yet. I wanted the professional credibility and I wanted the healing to run its full course before I did. But what I did do was I sought other topics of inspiration, and through those topics, I guess that was how. So technically, it was being spared from death and being given the chance to live. And to live because of the story, to live through the story. But most importantly, Cynthia, I don't believe I was only spared from death to share the story. I think I was spared from death to share the lessons that actually led to my triumph beyond victimization.
Yeah, your story is such an incredible one. You were beaten beyond recognition. the police thought that a train had ran over your face. Your doctor told you that your injuries, you had internal injuries that were really bad and that you might not be able to bear children. So I'm really wondering, how at the age of 15 did you get over this level of trauma, and how did you move beyond it?
Well, I think at 15, you actually don't get over it. In fact, it was the inability to cope that had me cope. And I don't know if that makes sense, because it's just too much for a 15-year-old child to process, because you cannot understand, number one, why someone who would actually do this to you in your purity. And so it's one thing to understand that, you know, it's another thing to just be so filled with emotion and to not know. You didn't ask for it, and yet you're feeling the shame to know that, sense deep within you, life is never going to be the same, but you had nothing to do with it, and yet you had everything to do with it. And so it ranges really from, you know, as the journey progresses, where the one thing, as I prepared for our talk, I realized that when I came out of sedation, it was a 72-hour sedation, and I woke up and I just knew my face was about 4 or 5 times its size. And so I started to feel, and I felt, but I also could not see myself. And I forced my eyes open. I felt my way to the mirror in my bedroom, and I forced my eyes open. And what was staring at me was a horror mask. And that was my moment of saying, that was not me. And only today, from a psychological perspective, as I prepared for this talk, I realized that that could have been an unconscious mechanism of coping, where I was not my experience. It was a mask staring back at me. But that was my moment 72 hours later of saying, this is not me. So in a way, at a very unconscious level, I distantiated from the nightmare, or from the observation of this nightmare. And yet the fact that I had my nightmares was just a reminder that it was not a movie, that it actually had happened. And so that was one way of coping, of distantiating myself from that. The other way was really to keep focusing on my dreams, which psychologically was denial and deflection. But that, in a way, almost withheld me from just falling apart. So it was me putting my energy still on my schoolwork, still wanting to prove so much, particularly to the world, that I was not a bad person. And the thing about brutalization or violation is that even though you're not a bad person, you begin to feel worthless in an inexplicable way. And my school grades was really my only way of, I think, even for myself, never mind others, just convincing myself that I was valid, that I still counted, that I could still dream. And that was the second component. The third was really also birthed very, very shortly after the rape, when at the age of 16, I had this voice say to me on the inside, child, if you didn't die when you were supposed to, you had to be living for a reason far greater than your dying.
Sure.
And that really, again, marked the beginning of a journey which was to unfold in a deep knowing that I was spared for something so huge, that I was spared to share not the pain, but to share something that would, and I had no idea what was going to come of it. But what I did do was I said to myself that there was no way I could have gone through what I went through for nothing, that I had to have gone through what I went through for something. And Cynthia, that something translates into moments like these, where I am now able to inspire others, because I've been there, not because a textbook told me as a post-psych graduate. It's because I've been there.
Lynn, I consider you an extraordinary person. A lot of persons who had gone through what you've gone through could have ended their lives. Of course, depression, anxiety, and a lot of things could have just come in. But for you to be able to put yourself together and to still work that way makes you a truly extraordinary person. And I admire you for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. But what keeps me humble about it, Cynthia, is that there have been so many who have walked the same path, who have triumphed perhaps in even greater ways than I did, but just did not get the opportunity to articulate their story, did not get the opportunity. In fact, some did not get to live. Some died as a result of the rape.
Yeah.
And the death I speak of here is the very death you spoke of, where some have died physically, but others have died metaphorically. Others die on the inside because you do die on the inside, because something in you changes forever. And I guess I'm grateful to these for having granted me the strength and the resilience to do what I'm doing now, because I believe through this experience I found my divine purpose, which has just grown from strength to strength.
Yeah, and will keep growing. Lynn, you were only 16 when you took on the justice system in 1983. That was really brave. Now tell me, what really happened then, and what were your challenges? Tell us your story. What happened then?
Yeah, I think there was quite a bit of challenge. My absolute greatest challenge, and one of my areas for advocacy right now and influencing South African policy. I hope Mr. Ramaphosa is going to be listening to this. Is the issue of bail. So my first challenge was when I woke up out of sedation. That person came out on a 500 Rand bail. And this individual lived in my community. This individual went to my church. And I lived in months of fear. I was paralyzed by the fear of him coming back. I also realized he'd not be that stupid, so he could send someone else to kill me. So I literally, so that I could not give evidence in court. So I literally went through months and months of internal torture, of fear, where I wanted to run from myself, but there was no place to go. And that was the first challenge in terms of just living in the same community as the person who has nearly killed you, but who did actually kill you on the inside. It was 1983, so it was a time when the level of stigmatization attached to violation, attached to domestic violence, attached to abuse was still so huge, and so much was swept under the carpet. In fact, it is alleged that I was not the first girl in the church that this person raped, but I was the third girl.
Goodness.
And that, yes, it was that, Cynthia, that I believe heightened my purpose as a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
I then knew why I was saved, and I could not have been saved to not fight for justice. If I had been saved and have decided to not fight for justice, I would really have nullified the save on my life. Why then would I have been saved? And in a way, I felt broken I felt chosen in my brokenness, because here were 3 girls that had gone through this before, but had never sought justice. And I believed and I felt in my heart that I was the one that was spared to actually, and strong enough to actually seek justice. And I did. The justice system, so what happened was there was 7 months between being raped and then the first court date, which was supposed to be the ultimate court date. But when they saw my pictures, they realized that this was not rape, it was actually attempted murder. And the court case went from a regional court to a Supreme Court. And that meant I needed to wait from July, August, September, October, another 3 months. So it was 10 months of fear, 10 months of having this individual out in the same community and getting to court, being accused of the fact that you thought this all up. So in court, you get victimized again. In court, your soul gets raped. In court, you get torn apart. I needed to fight for a very truth that I had not denied. I needed to fight for my life that I didn't take. I needed to fight for justice when I actually did not ask for violation. And to be told in a courtroom that you are thinking all of this up because you are an attention-seeking, intelligent teenager. That the secondary victimization is almost, it debilitates you. It tires soul a little more. It was very, very difficult keeping it together in court. And of course, after that, the third challenge is when you hear the sentence. And I was very excited when it went to the Supreme Court. And I geared myself up for the fact that it was going to be 25 years. And he only got 10. And that was betrayal. That was betrayal by a justice system. It was, did I wait for this? Did I go through all of this to fight for justice to actually get this? And I think that was something very, very hard to accept. I heard very many years later that he never ever got to serve the full sentence. And I thank God that I never knew before the time, long before the time. In fact, it was said that the church gave him a character reference to get him out earlier. I didn't venture and I did not make that any of my business.
That is sad. What?
Yeah. In fact, I sometimes have many church leaders sometimes sit opposite me and their tears roll. I'm speaking pastors here. And they say, how is it that you have been through what you've been through, but you still have the love of Christ inside of you and inside of your heart? And my response to them is, if ever I understood, even at the age of 16, and as young as I was, if ever I understood the church to only be a building, I might have been angrier. But I think I realized then already that the church was really God housed inside my heart. And that is the church that I protected.
Well, that's really made a lot of sense. But then it's a story for another day, because the whole abuse thing, we actually need to, well, it's good to know that you were able to speak up. And the more women will get to speak up once they encounter such, the better for all of us. You can imagine what would have happened if you hadn't stood your ground to speak up. You could have imagined how many other women who could have been victims of the same, who might not even have had the opportunity to live to tell the stories or to inspire someone else. So it's really crazy what is happening out there. But I am happy, I am glad that we have people like you, people like me, because I am an advocate for equality. I'm an advocate that everybody should be treated fairly. A woman should be treated fairly, a man should be treated fairly, and a child should be treated fairly.
Absolutely.
Yes. So the justice
Absolutely.
system, the whole justice system thing and every other thing is a story for another day that I wouldn't want to delve into. Yeah, we're going to talk about it some other time, but let's just let's just finish up with this part of the interview. Now, beyond rape, you went through teenage pregnancy, gave birth to a baby that weighed 870 grams, born at 25 weeks when you were 20, completed all your undergraduate and postgraduate studies full-time and part-time while you had your children, faced divorce, single parenthood, and business challenges. How did you become a victim? Did you not become a victim in all this, and what kept you going?
I absolutely owed myself my fulfilled dreams, Cynthia. In empowering my dreams, I disempowered victimhood. I owed myself some form of fulfillment and success that nobody was going to be able to touch or damage or taint or violate. And that was what I termed my dream domain. When I gave birth to this baby, a tiny baby at the age of 20, I took the demand on my success to another level because this baby deserved nothing but a successful mommy. And my children deserved nothing more or nothing less than the best successful mom, a mom that they could be proud of. And so giving in and giving up was never, ever, and this is as honest as I can get, it was never on any given day, however hard my days were, and they were hard. I had to do assignments on the floor of a train in the mornings. I had to do nappies when I got home. There was no Kimbies at that point in time. Kimbies were for weekends. It was cloth nappy during the week. But there was no one point in time when I felt that I needed to give up. Because if I had given up, I would not have been able to be that mother that I was called and destined to be. And the third thing was that I had to assume responsibility. I had to assume responsibility for my healing, and I had to assume responsibility for my parenting. And you cannot do good parenting in a wounded state. Neither can you fulfill your divine purpose in a wounded state. And as I was called and knowing what I was called to do in this world, I absolutely did not look back. I looked forward in terms of how could I possibly use what was meant to break me to build me? How could I find the purpose in the deepest pain so that that purpose would be able to, not the gain that I'd find in it would not just be for my gain, but it would be for humanity's gain through me. And that is how I chose to never ever be a victim, because had I chosen victimized thinking and victimhood, I'd never have been able to fulfill my divine mandate.
So how were you able to find your power, Lynn? How did you do that?
Well, I found it in the fulfilled dreams. I definitely found it in standing up for myself, even in a justice system that did not serve me. I think that was me saying to the world at the very tender age of 16, I did not die, I'm still standing. It was me literally articulating my voice, which was to become a louder voice as the years continued. But that voice of that 16-year-old little girl, it carried in court. And it meant something. It meant something to me. How else I found my power was 27, 28 years down the line. When I wrote the poem, I realized that while I was being brutalized and bashed, this individual was swearing at his mother and his sister all of the time. At that point in time, I was already a postgraduate psychology, clinical psychology student, or I was already a postgrad. And I realized there's a concept in psychology called displaced anger. And I was the object of his displaced anger. And when I realized that after writing the poem 27 years later, what it did for me was it really objectified the experience. So the distance that I once found between the mirror and myself had now become so distant, where it was a matter of, wait a minute. This thing was never about me. It was not because I appeared cheap. It was not because of anything. In fact, I was everything but that. In fact, there was nothing wrong with me, because victims of violation, the very first space you go to is, what have I done? What have I done wrong? What have I done to deserve this? Where is this punishment coming from? It's warped, but you think that because there's nothing else to think, because there's no other sense to make. And so in making the sense that I was an object of anger that had nothing to do with me, but had everything to do with an individual that didn't have it all together, made me feel more together, made me realize that there was never anything wrong with me. In fact, everything was right with me.
Yeah. You know, I keep wondering, you did not just survive one rape, you survived two. And I keep asking myself, how did you do that?
That was a huge one. That was one that could have easily taken me back to a space of a grave, when I had planted a garden beyond having been buried in one grave. And as I got my life together, as I became one very dynamic individual, this happened. On both counts, I was pure. On both counts, I was as pure physically and spiritually as I could be. And I think that was, for me, the hugest question mark. I could have gone into a spate of many years asking, why me? And then, by God's grace and by divine purpose, all I could go back to was, why have you been chosen to go through something twice? The second one was not, well, it was brutal, but in a different way. It was a drug rape. But why have you to go through something twice in your life, in your purest of state? What sense can you make of that? And the only sense I could make, Cynthia, was a sense that would bring me to this moment with you, with other thought leaders in the world, that in that second one, my divine purpose was not birthed as in the first one. My divine purpose was exaggerated, it was accentuated, my calling was deepened to a point that I now want to breathe it, live it, be it, and heal not just this continent, but this world, because I believe it was not by accident. The only sense I can make of it without victimized thinking is that my divine purpose was accentuated, and I have heeded to that, and that has been my healing.
What message do you have to other women who have been raped, violated, and abused?
I have to say to them that you are not the experience, that you are not the content, that you are not what happens to you. What you are is what you choose to become, despite that. And that doesn't happen to you because there's something wrong with you. In fact, it happens to you because there's something right with you. That you are, because you are pure, the violation for the perpetrator, it's more fulfilling. Perpetrators don't go for cheap. Perpetrators don't go for easy. And so in that knowledge, just know that, Eleanor Roosevelt said, nobody hurts, angers, or humiliates you without your consent. I added violate to that. Nobody hurts, angers, or violates you without your consent. So we don't consent to violation. Violation happens, but heck, what we can do is choose how we are going to deal with it. And the one way to deal with violation is to violate yourself because of it. Not diminish yourself because of it. To step into a sense of I am experience, I am who I choose to become as a child of God, despite that experience. I am who I choose to become despite my pain and despite my fear. And that really, our responses determine our destiny. It's not what happens to us that determines it, but it's how we respond. And so we've got to respond in a way greater than the violation. We've got to respond in a way greater than blaming and shaming, especially ourselves. And to know that we are worthy and that we're inherently powerful and that no one woman asks for this and that there is absolutely no validation, there is no justifiable reason why you are violated. So don't you dare question at any one point what you have done wrong, and don't you dare believe that you are at any one point deserving of any form of violation, because as a child of God, you certainly are a queen.
No, the answer you've just given is just the best answer anyone could give. I'm sure someone out there who has been violated, beaten, raped, abused, who draw some inspiration from what you just said. You are not abused because you are at your lowest state. You're not abused because you are worthless. You are abused because there's something much more in you that you have to give to the world. There is a purpose, there is a reason for everything. And the earlier someone else out there who is passing through the same realizes this and moves on with life to achieve that which is destined to achieve, the better for all of us as women. So thank you for that powerful response. I just love it. Okay,
there's that saying. I didn't prepare this, but just as a by the way, there's a saying that success is the best revenge. And
yeah.
I think, yeah, I think for any woman who's been through abuse and violation, to be able to not succeed in order to prove to the violator or the perpetrator, but in order to just, that is the differentiation just there, that I'm not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And in my life, success really has been my best revenge.
Yeah, it has. Now, aside coming over to your super talents now, aside being an inspirational speaker, I know you're also a talented writer. Could you tell us about your books, your poems, and what inspired you to writing them?
Thank you. I think what inspired, I'll start with the last part of the question first.
Okay.
What inspired me to write is really, it was a way of extending the scope of influence. It was a way of extending the reach in terms of not the story, but the lessons that the story has imparted. And so had I not, or had I chosen to not write, I'd really be doing a fraction of the divine purpose. I would be fractional in my purpose. My purpose is to use every means and mechanism possible, every media platform, every platform period, to inspire and to empower and to uplift. And so my writing the story and sharing the lessons was really a way of extending my influence in this world, Cynthia. My book is called Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me. It's book 1. Book 2 is Waiting in the Wings. To add that the book is not about rape, that the book really is about healing, universal tools and tools of empowerment, but they are universal. Freedom and captivity are universal. Forgiveness is universal. Transformation is universal. And so it's not only about trauma. In fact, it's about a journey. But in my introduction, I also say that this book has never been about me. This book really is a representation of many untold stories, of many unsung heroes, of many who have died metaphorically and physically and never got to share not so much the pain, but the victory. And that is what the book is really about. It is the salutation to human resilience, not to Lynn's resilience. Who I am does not belong to me. I am because you are. Yeah.
Okay.
And my poetry, well, there's some poetry in the book. And then this particular poem that I will share with you now is a poem which I wrote after the second rape. And the poem is called Hear Her Roar. And I think not just for women who have been violated and men who have been violated, but for everyone out there, we all have a voice. We've been given a voice that has been placed inside of us, and by virtue of accessing our worth and our inherent power, we cannot express our voice authentically if we do not own our authentic power wholly. And we were born to express our voice, not because we want to say something in this world, but because we have a meaningful contribution to make. And there's just not some of us that have a divine purpose in this world. All of us are destined and born for purpose. And we've got to find it. And actually, we don't even have to find it. We just have to be our highest, truest, most authentic selves in any given moment to fulfill that divine purpose. And so Hear Her Roar goes like this. She may have silently screamed when pain became a second name. She may have swallowed rivers of tears, pretending not to drown. She may even have contemplated death when she felt there was no reason to keep on keeping on. But now hear her roar as she shouts this to the world. While pain became my second name, it was my gateway to victory all the same. And the rivers of tears in which I thought I'd drown, well, that's now become a riverbed on which my mermaid treasures can now be found. And as for death, death died its bloody death when my divine purpose became my only breath. And now my roar is the tender, compassionate, inspiring whispers I feed my brothers and sisters so that their own suffering will not starve them. And now my roar is my voice through which I channel those who have been devoiced by systems and perplexities beyond their own control. And now my roar is the half moon that shines across my face as I smile at the beauty of living a purposeful, triumphant life. And now my roar is the license I choose to give myself to unconditionally love myself, because self-love now amplifies my presence in this world. And now my roar is the laughter that tumbles from deep within my soul, bouncing between light and love and the realization that I was never broken but always whole. And now my roar is my self-made oasis, birthed in a desert in which I did not ask to be birthed in, get lost in, or get raped in twice. And now my roar is my unapologetic, uncompromised authenticity. And now my roar is the true celebration of my precious soul's sacredity. Thank you.
Oh my. Lynn, you're incredibly talented. Oh my God. This was just superb. Superb. Okay, Lynn, now your
Well,
books.
I've got a mantra, Cynthia, that my mantra is, it never comes from me, it comes through me. Yeah, so I'm simply a vessel.
It just flows.
It comes from heaven through me.
Okay, sis, I would also want to know your books. Are they available online? Should someone want to get your books, where can they access your books?
Yeah, they are available. Well, they are. My first book is available online currently. It is available on Amazon.com. It's called Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me. It's available in Kindle format, paperback, it's hard copy, and it will soon be available on another portal in another ebook format. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Now to our last question, or my last question. What is your definition of true power?
My definition of true power is a power that is not borrowed, a power that comes from self-referral, a power that comes from the authenticity that sits on the inside of us, a power that is inherent and that does not depend on which community we get born into, which social class we get born into, or which clothes we get to wear, or where we get to live. In fact, it's a power that transcends the objects of our experience. It's a power that is not borrowed. It is a power that is owned. It is a power that nobody can touch. It's a power that nobody can dilute and that nobody can taint, because it sits on the inside of us, and it sits on the inside of our DNA, which is divine. Perpetrators and violators borrow their power. They borrow power from vulnerability. They borrow power from weakness. And that is the whole illusion around the power that they think they have. Because nobody who is powerful needs to borrow power. The only time you need to borrow power is when you don't own it. And the only time you don't own your power is when you've not yet accessed it, because either you have your own wounds, or you have your own demons, or you're just not wise enough to know that you carry the divine DNA within you. And so true power is power that's not borrowed of someone else's weakness, of someone else's social vulnerability, gender vulnerability, and whatever other vulnerability there is. True power is owned, and we're born with it. We just get to be taught otherwisely. And in reclaiming who we inherently are, which is really children of a mighty God, when we do that, we really reclaim our power. And there's nothing borrowed about it. There's everything owned about it.
Now I'm supercharged. I'm inspired. I'm motivated, and everything is happening to me at the same time. And I'm sure our viewers are so excited to hear from you, Lynn. Thank you so much for being on this episode. And now to our viewers who are watching us online, I'd like you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until we meet on yet another episode of Talent Center Stage, I remain yours truly, Cynthia Obiwanne.